we need to focus upon when we talk and when we pay attention to the details of this chapter. So, the chapter in a nutshell is that every technical writer has to plan, then draft or write a document, and after doing that, the job is not complete until and unless the technical writer finishes it by editing it, by producing it in a perfect form, by taking out the mistakes, the errors of spellings, of punctuation, of grammar, of sentence structure, of technical uh, detail that we are going to read in the next chapter, that is chapter number 4, and of everything that we've already discussed. So, in the light of your knowledge, when you plan, by taking into consideration the fundamental ideas the audience says, when you plan and you plan on your message, you have a message, you have a context to encode in writing. It can be a shorter one, it can be a detailed one. So the planning, the writing, the editing will depend upon the length of the complexity of the topic or the message or the idea or the context. So the smaller the context, the smaller the planning, the smaller the drafting, and the smaller the editing, and vice versa. If it is a bigger idea that you need to write more things upon, so your research will be more, your planning will be more, and it will be elaborate, and it will be lengthier in writing and in editing. So the bottom line is that all a technical writer has to do, this chapter will tell us that he has to plan, he has to draft, and then he has to edit a document. Why? What for? For a targeted audience. And sometimes you do it all by yourself if it is an individual work, and sometimes you have to do it in the form of a group. Like, for example, in the eighth semester, we often have to, assign you with a project, and you do it and you write it in the form of a written report. So when you are reporting about it, what you have done, normally it is assigned in the form of a group of 4 or 5 students, and you plan together, you draft together, and you edit it together, and you present it together. So it's a collective effort. So whatever is the case, tomorrow as a group work, today as group work, tomorrow maybe when you become professionals, you'll be dealing with things individually. So, whatever is the case, these three things will be performed by you. If someone says, what is the production of a document? What is technical writing? So, if one liner we give it in the light of today's lecture, we say technical writer has to write something for the audience, and he has to plan, draft, and edit it before presenting it. These three things must be done. And when these three things are successfully done, it means we have entered and performed it in the form of a process. Otherwise, not. The second bullet tells you that, like all processes, like all processes, technical writing also proceeds in bits and stages and pieces, and it's a progression which is stepwise, which is not hurry scurry, which is not in the wink of an eye, in the blink of an eye. It happens, but you make it happen. It does not happen or it does not occur automatically. It is you behind. It's not the gun that fires correctly right on target. It's the man behind the gun who aims, who plans, who takes into consideration all the g forces and the windage and the elevation and everything, and then he makes use of a machine, anything. So it's you, the writer behind your document, It does not occur by itself. It does not happen. It's you, the strings of excellence of execution are in your hands. So you make it happen. You make it uh, effective and efficiently generated. And how do you do that? You do everything with planning, correct, perfect execution or drafting. Right? Drafting means writing. Why do we call it a draft? Draft basically means to pull. In olden times, uh, people, before the invention of the typewriters and the keyboards and the computers, people used to write things with hands and with pens or quills. They used to dip it in ink and place it on paper, and until and unless they pulled it, they dragged it, nothing was written. So you have to pull or you have to draft the nib of the pen in order to write. So writing gets its name drafting from here, and now it has become uh, a jargon or a term for composing, for writing, be it on paper with hand or be it on uh, computer, and but with the help of the keys, it is called as drafting. So you have to draft means you have to write and you have to edit. Now, since it has been termed as a process by the name of the chapter, technical writing process or technical communication process. So this chapter explains us that what are the details of this process? How do we deal with it as a process? So let me tell you one more thing before we proceed, and you should keep it and bear it in mind that it's a universal fact which no one can deny, that everything in this universe is a process. Everything. Thing doesn't happen. Take the unicellular organism and its division, be it a bacteria or a virus or anything, a paramecium, an amoeba, anything, down to the whole universal systems, solar systems, and galaxies and whatnot, you will find there are processes going on everywhere. The Almighty Allah created everything, and He did it in the form of a kun, and it was fayakun. But believe me, and you know it, and you will know it if you ponder upon it a little bit, that that kun would have meant the creation, the setting into motion of various processes. And when processes start performing their activities, things are regulated, things become controlled, things become beneficial, things become effective. Be it the creation of night and day, or the change in the weather from autumn to spring and summer and winter, be it rain, be it the water cycle, be it the solar system, the revolutions of the planets and everything, be it the birth of a child right from the embryonic stages, becoming fetus down to infancy and then toddler and then teenager and all the way till the time one goes back after dying. Everything is a process. So technical writing has termed in this chapter as process, this process, and if it is a process, and processes do not happen haphazardly. It's not a hurry scurry attempt or manner. It is not topsy turvy. It is controlled, composed, deliberated, done with intentions, certain things performed, certain avoided. Then and only then there are checks and balances. And when there are checks and balances, you control the good things to happen and you control the bad things not to happen, and then and only then there are effective and efficient performances. For the sake of our readers, coming down to the writing, technical writing. So we enable our audience to act. Why? Because we have generated the document as a process. And processes do not happen, they have some stages that happen, make them happen in the form of steps. Now let's see what are those steps and stages if it is a process. And we have proved and we have said, yes, it is a process. Let's proceed further. Well, these are the things to just learn, to discuss, to talk upon, to disseminate, to ponder over. These are the things we'll be discussing and you will be, inshallah, learning. And it is very important that before you proceed, you have an idea what am I going to do. Rather, this is the fundamental idea of technical writing, that tell your readers when you are writing what you are going to write and then write about it. So the same is being done by me right now. I'm telling you on this slide what are we going to focus and learn in this chapter. So point number one is in the form of bullet number one, and it says, what is a process? We have just discussed it earlier on, that a process is something which does not happen in the wink of an eye haphazardly. A process is a controlled performance in the form of certain steps and stages. So we have discussed it, and you need to focus upon it. And technical writing has been termed as a process. And if it is a process, we will be talking about the various steps involved in it and the various activities we need to perform in it in the coming slides. Bullet number two tells you, why is technical writing a process? Why is the generation of a document a process? And we have also thrown light upon it, and you will be focusing upon it till the end of the chapter and always in your coming lives whenever you write, today as students, tomorrow as professionals, that it is a process, must be taken, handled in steps and stages. And then point number three, which we are going to focus upon in this chapter, will be that this technical writing process, technical communication process, involves is consisting up of three stages. That is why it is called as a process. So the answer to the question, why is technical writing a process, is that it is a process because it is performed by a writer in three stages. So we'll be discussing in this chapter these three stages and their details in order to get the important things out of this chapter, to learn and to adopt and to implement all our lives. That what are those three stages and what are the sub points under those three stages? This is the whole chapter all about. Well, let's have an overview, a sum up of the chapter and these three stages in order to give us a narrative, in order to give us a point from where we can proceed by keeping it as the base of every information, every detail which will emerge and come out of it. So it says the goal of the writing process is to generate a clear and effective document. Why? Because that allows an audience to act. Now, this last word act is very important. The purpose, the goal, the target, the aim, the objective of technical writing, of a technical writer, of every document is is to generate a clear and effective document which allows, which enables, which facilitates, which empowers that target audience for whom we have created the document to act. Now, this to act is very important, very, very important. I write a full fledged page for you, and it has so beautiful terms and words and sentence structure. But when you reach the bottom line, and if I ask you, what does it require you to do? And you say, sir, we read it, but we do not know what does it require of us to do. It simply means it's not a technically written document. It may have a literary value. It may be informing you about something, but if the three purposes we have discussed in a previous chapter, that a technical piece of writing informs, it instructs, and it persuades to do something, to act upon something, because the definition said technical writing aims to get work done. So to do work, to get work done by our a reader is the goal, is the aim, is the objective. So please remember why we indulge into it as a process, why we are so careful in planning, careful in writing, and at the end we edit it for making it uh, error free and making it aligned to the rules and regulations of technical writing, because we want it to facilitate, to empower, to enable that target audience to act. So to act is very important, please. Whenever something comes to you, whenever you write something, do find in it whether it tells what to do and how to do and why to do in an easy and effective manner. So bearing it in mind, we will be trying to learn the details of the three stages involved in it. Now, the three stages which are involved in the creation of every document, be it an application, a letter, a memorandum, a small report, informal report, a large report, a formal report, a thesis, a research paper, anything, anything. So the planning I told you in the beginning, and the writing and the editing varies and depends upon the length of the document, but there has to have a planning. There must be a planning and drafting and editing. Otherwise, you are not indulging into the process of generation of a document. You are committing it. You're just doing it. But we need not to just do it. We need to perform a process upon it. So the first stage in the production of any document, small or large, the length may vary, the time may vary, but there has to be a process. Number one is pre-writing stage, and pre means pehle se, pre means before, and post means baad wali, after. So the pre-writing stage involves, obviously, the what do? You plan by discovering and collecting all the relevant information about the communication situation, and you decide what steps to follow. But before you start doing something, you plan. What is planning? The two chapters we have already read and discussed. You need to keep in your mind all the fundamental ideas. How will you going to be audience centered, and what are the details of being audience centered? How are you going to be presentational and responsible? And you know the steps, and we have discussed them in length and detail. Then you need to profile and define your audience. Who are they? What kind of existing knowledge level do they possess about the topic or the subject? What are their expectations from me? What are their what is their position? Wha- How to be credible in their eyes, how to make the document make them positively inclined, how to create good feelings in them. So we've discussed all these things. So in planning and pre-writing stage, you do all the things before you really start drafting. So it's before the writing, whatever you think, whatever comes in your mind, whatever you write, whatever you research, whatever you collect in the form of data, in the form of inputs, is included in the pre-writing stage. So you collect the relevant information, and then out of it all, you decide which things to write something upon, which things not to be included, which things to make information upon first, and which things to come in the second step, and which in the third, and so on and so forth. How to be, top, adopting the top-down method and everything of what being audience-centered. So you plan, you make a draft, you make a rough sketch, an outline of everything you need to do on a drafting pad, on loose sheets, wherever. But you need to write something. You need to point out something for your own facility when you start writing. One who does not do it uh, will be undergoing a situation, a feeling where he or she thinks him or her to be overconfident. We do not want to be overconfident. We need to take steps by thinking twice. We need to be organized. We need to worry about something. We need to be more caring. We don't want to be callous. We don't want to be, uh, you know, letting ineffectiveness and difficulty pop up for our readers when they come to read the document. So, for the sake of creating facility, in order to enable them to understand it fully, so that they can grasp out of it the information, the instruction, the persuasion, so that they can act, is our liability as a writer. Is it rests it rests upon our shoulders. So we shouldering this responsibility, perform it, even if we are confident, even if we think that we have got the guts and we can do things haphazardly. No, we don't want to run fast. We need to be taking care of things slowly, steadily, and we want to win the race, because the slow and steady wins the race. So, for the sake of an effective writing and a writer, you need to think, plan slowly, gradually, effectively. So these things are done in the pre-writing stage. The next stage, number two, is the writing stage, or the drafting of the document. And obviously, whatever we have planned earlier on before this stage now will be utilized by us, and we really start composing, writing. Today, obviously, on computers, desktops, and gadgets, so we type, we write things. And writing is sometimes also called as planning, and it is related to the first phase, planning. Why? Because in the pre-writing stage you plan fully, and then you start executing. But when you start writing, while writing, a point comes in your mind: no, the sentence that I'm making, that I'm writing, contains a bit of a difficulty, and this does not highlight that point. And if I'm thinking from the perspective of my readers, I think it will not be fully understandable and comprehensible for them. So let's change it. So, while writing, you are also planning. So, it's an ongoing process. You have planned in the pre-writing stage, but while writing you and composing the sentences and drafting, you are also taking a second view. You're reviewing it in your mind. You're launching a censorship. You're editing at the same time. So it it becomes planning as well. It becomes planning because you are thinking. You're talking to your own self. So sometimes and often it becomes planning. Anyways, in order to just define and describe these three stages, one is pre-writing, second one is drafting or writing stage, in which you really start writing your document on the basis of the already collected information, data, homework you have done on audience, on your topic, and you have collected things, you have met people before writing, you've gathered a lot of information in the form of your points that you have taken on your notepad, rough draft pad, whatever. So you select and arrange the elements, all those things in your document for the sake of your document. So it is the common sense with which we are proceeding. It is the common sense, and the common sense tells us I have so much information collected in my pre-writing stage while I was planning that almost 30, 40 pages will be written by me on my project that I've done. And then you decide out of all the information which things should be written first. So you are in the light of your common sense, you are deciding what to include and where to include it. In the beginning, this point should be mentioned afterwards. I'll mention it in chapter number 2. So this is your own planning. So you plan and you write in the light of your pre-writing stage. And number third stage is the post-writing stage. Post means badwali. Post means the thing that comes afterwards. And in the post-writing stage, you have finished the document, and now you edit the document. The chief, the prime, the most important activity of this stage is that you edit, you proofread the document for uniformity, for it to be error free, and you make it a uniform whole, uniform product of your imagination and hard work, and you make it presentable. You make it come into a finished final form, which is now ready to be submitted, presented to the audience, whoever he is or she is, a group of committee, one member, anyone, supervisor, anyone. So these are the three stages which are involved in the process of technical writing. If someone thinks oneself to be over smart and decides to just jump on to conclusions and let's not take pain, let's not work hard, let's not follow the steps and stages, it looks like something childish. No, no, no. You have to be slow. You need to be deliberating. You need to be contemplating. You need to be steadily and slowly and steadily doing things in on conscious level in the light of your common sense and in the light of your rationality. Pick and choose, pick and choose, pick and choose. This is the law of life. Why man is the supreme being? Because God gave him a reason, a rationality to choose, not given to animals. It has been only given to genies and humans. Even the angels are devoid of it. But we have been programmed to do things, and then when we do things, we use our rationality, our planning, our picking and choosing. This is bad, this is good. Let's do the good, let's abandon, let's desert, let's go away, let's leave the bad thing. Why? Because we know the consequences. So keeping your eye on the consequences, and you want to create better results, you do good things and you leave the bad things. You edit things, you compose things in a right way, you plan things in a right way. Or reversing it, you plan in a right way, you gather things in a right way, a lot of things. But when you start writing, you write in a good way, and then when you start editing, you edit in a good way. And you, even if some mistake was committed in the writing stage and bad things were composed, in the editing and the post writing stage, you eradicate, you rub things and erase things out, and bring the good ones in and take the bad ones out. So this is how you proceed. This is the law of life. This is what it is all about. So please proceed. Do not think yourselves over smart. Do not think in an overconfident way. Be slow. Take things slowly, gradually, so that the ultimate result is good. So our eyes are set on the ultimate result to enable our audience to act in a way we want them to act, so that they can get the work done. That's the goal. So let's proceed to the next slide. Keeping in mind the things we have talked so far, and the two chapters we have talked so far, keeping all the things in mind, let's proceed. And if it is to be regarding the planning of the document, it simply means that now we are talking about which stage? Pre-writing stage. The blue star tells us that the activities of the pre-writing stage are to be discussed underneath. And what are these? Depending on the situation. Now, what does this word situation refers or refer to? Situation here means the communication situation. I will reiterate upon it, and I will make you recall what we have already talked about. I said in the earlier lectures, I remember, and let me remind you, that you are likely to face, it's a probability that you face an expert audience or a lay audience. Now, once you're facing a lay audience, it's one situation, it's one communication situation. But when you face a different set of audience, it's another situation. And every topic and every subject brings also a different communication situation. So, on the basis of the topic, subject, context which is to be encoded needs to be encoded in the written form, and on the basis of the audience you have profiled and defined, you are faced with a new, a specific situation in its own nature. And in the light, you define the communication situation. Then what is my battlefield? How am I going to, wage this war of communication? Well, I mean, in a positive manner. So you decide, and in the light of this decision, you plan. So planning can be brief and lengthy. I told you, if the topic, if the context, if the subject was vast, your planning will be large, your writing will be large, your editing will take also more time. So it is directly proportional with the subject. Smaller the subject, smaller the planning, smaller the writing, smaller the editing. Larger the document, larger the planning, larger the editing. You also need to talk with your own self, and you need to ask yourselves questions about the audience. What kind of audience am I facing? In the light of chapter number 2, you profile them. This is what you do in your planning. Then you think about your message. What is my message? What is it all about? Because if you think about your message, it will also help you decide about the format. That what is going to be your format? So you decide upon your audience and you decide upon your subject. For example, if in your mind there is uh, something like there is going to be a meeting in your working workplace. Now you decide on the message and you decide on the audience. So this is the message, but the audience has to be, you need to inform all of them. So it means let's not make it, let's not write it in the form of a report, because report has a different format. Now this message and this information should be disseminated, relayed, and sent forward either in the form of emails to all employees if you have got the email addresses, or let's write it and place it in the form of a circular day to day internal notice, internal organizational notice, and paste it and pin it on the main notice boards. So you choose the message, and in the light of the message, when you have come to know what it is all about, you need to decide the channel, the format. So not only that the audience should be taken into account, the message, the subject, the topic, the context which needs encoding also be thought upon in order to plan in a good way. And that will also help you manage the time and decide on the format. Should I write your you have chosen a topic in your final year project, and this is something which cannot be written in the form of an email, in the form of a letter, in the form of an application. No, what format I need to choose. You say, okay, there should be a report on it. So look, you decide on the message and your format comes in your mind automatically. So, and then your time management. Okay, this is a long report and it will take like months, 2, 3 months. Let's plan on dividing the activities with respect to time. How will I be managing it? How should I tackle it? So the time management, the choosing of the format depends upon the message and the audience. Everything is, interrelated, and you need to, keep all of these points in mind. So when you talk with your own self in the planning about all these things, the answers will be guiding you to do things effectively. So this must be done, this must be performed. This slowness, do not think it a retarded fashion or manner. Be slow and, plan the way the textbook guides you to plan. Don't run in a hurry scurry manner. You may lose sight of a lot of important things. So in order to be, more caring, more deliberate, we need to really think on these terms that we are talking about. So when we plan, we look at our audience, we look at our message, we look at the format, we decide upon the time available. We also need to determine the constraints. We also need to determine the constraints which are about to come in the next slide. We'll talk on it. But right now, just remember that you need to, constraint is a hurdle. It's a problem, a probable problem, which may pop up, which is likely to pop up, or which needs to be thought over, and you're planning, you're handling, you're tackling, you're dealing, your manner should be in the light of the constraint. For example, you start traveling towards your university. So you think about the railway line crossing, and you think that the gates might be closed because it's the time to of. So you say, let's leave my home 10 minutes earlier for the train to, and so that I may cross that railway crossing before the train arrives. And because when the train arrives, the gates will be closed, and I'll be losing like 15, 20 minutes. So this is a constraint in your way of reaching your plan you're traveling right in the light of this constraint. So constraints are those probable problems which lurk, which are present somewhere in your way, and you need to think and you need to take them into account as well. You need to choose an effective strategy after you have decided upon your audience, your message. You need to think about an effective strategy, and you also develop a production schedule. So, taking that example again, when you think about the constraint, you will leave your house accordingly before the normal time. You may leave 10, 15, 20 minutes earlier, and you have a travel schedule that a rough plan in your mind that I'll reach that place in time, and then there may be traffic jam, and there may be traffic lights on the way, and then there may be the school children being dropped to the various institutions by the parents and the vans. So I might be, stuck in the jam traffic. So you take into account all the activities. You perform this little bit of homework, and then you travel in the light of these. Same is the case with the production of the document. And what are the constraints in the production of a document? They are later slides, the coming slides will throw light upon uh, these. Let's proceed. So the first thing that you need to take into account is what affect. It's not with EFFECT, it's with affect AFFECT, means असरअंदाज होंगी, असरअंदाज होती हैं as a verb. So what constraints affect this situation? Which situation? Your communication situation in which you are trying to act and head towards the composition, the generation of your document, whatever the topic is. So you need to think about the constraints. Now, a constraint is a factor, as we have discussed earlier on in the previous slide. We've just discussed that it's a probable problem. It's if it is not a problem, it's a factor. It's a variable. Variable is something which changes. So the traffic jam is a variable. Sometimes, if there is a lot of traffic on the road, you may get jammed into it. But if it is a lesser traffic, the flow is right, there's no hindrance, and it passes on. So it may vary. It's not necessary that you'll get stuck into it. You may be flowing in the flow easily, smoothly, and reach your destination with relative uh, comfort and less trouble. So it's a variable. So constraint is a variable. It's a problem. It's a probable problem. It may pop up, it may not, but you have to plan right according to it by taking it into account. You cannot overlook. You cannot, just avoid it. You have to have it when it is being planned. It means when the document is being planned. So there are like six constraints that defined underneath. Number one is time. Time definitely is a constraint because you are assigned a task by your supervisor today, teacher, lab engineer, tomorrow by your boss or by anyone, colleagues or superiors, or you have an intention of writing something for someone, whatever is the case. Time is always there. Time is the number of hours and weeks until the date the document is due. For example, your supervisor, let's talk about the final semester because now your section C is on the eighth semester. third semester mathematics students, BS students are in the third semester. But let's take the hypothetical supposed example of the last semester. Your supervisors have assigned you to write a report and to perform a project and to write a report on it. Now they have said that you have this much time, say for example 2 months or 3 months, and you have to submit your report on that day till this time. Now they have given you a deadline. You have to meet this deadline. Until the document is due, you can play, you can work on it. But if you're not planned, if you are over smart, if you are overconfident, you think you are, if you think you are, you may lose sight of, you may lose track of effective progression. So let's be planned. So in the pre-writing stage, you consider time as a constraint and you plan right according to it. So your discovering of the information of the relevant data required in the pre-writing stage starts your research, your interviewing, taking notes, whatever it is, sitting on the internet, reading things in the library on that project, doing things practically in the lab, going to somewhere, getting things prepared, welded, or structure is involved, whatever is the case. A mathematics student won't have it, but the mechanical students will definitely have these things. Anyways, whatever is the case, situation, I said communication situation varies from topic to topic, from subject to subject. But you have to have these constraints in your mind. Keeping them in mind, you have to plan, you have to organize. So time is a constraint. Definitely, it is a constraint. Then second constraint is length. Now, length is the number of pages which will be there in the final document. For example, you have chosen to write a research paper. Okay, fine, it will not be that lengthy, but you have chosen to write a thesis, final year project report. It will be, lengthy, and there will be a lot of pages into it until you finally print it. The number of pages into it, the length of the document. So, length influences, affects time, because the lengthier the document, the lengthier the time required. The smaller the length of the document, the lesser the planning, the lesser the writing time, the lesser the editing time. So one influences the other. Length is also to be taken into account. The third constraint is the budget. Budget means it specifies the amount of money available to produce the document. For example, it's just a report which will be binded, which will be printed from a printing press, and it will be presented. 4 or 5 copies will be needed. One copy with the student, one copy in the department, one copy in the central library, university library. One will be sent to, for example, the HEC or the PEC, suppose, or to your supervisor, suppose. So you need some budget. You're composing. If you get it composed, you write it with hand, you get it composed, you'll give it to a composer, and then it will be printed, fine paper will be used, it will be binded, hard binded, jacketed before presentation. So a certain budget is involved. I'm giving you the example of you right now as a student, but say for example you're working in Atlas Honda or Indus Pakistan Indus Motors, for example, and the new model of the car has to have uh, a user manual, and there are like 200 units, and it means 200 user manuals. So now there's a lot of budget involved. So you need to take care of the budget. How many pages? How many of them are colored pages? The rate of the color page printing will be more. So everything has to be taken into account. So budget is also a constraint. Sometimes you do spiral binding. Sometimes you do hard binding. Sometimes there are glazed sheets involved, colored pages. So it has to have an effect. In your planning, do consider this as a constraint, as a point to ponder. Next is the method of production. Next constraint is the method of production. An informal document may be written with hand on a A4 paper, just by tearing a leaf off from your loose sheets or drafting back. No problem. But a formal report, formal letter, or formal document has to be written formally, composed, printed. So there is always a method which is used while producing a document. It's the equipment that you need. If it is to be printed, you need a printer for yourself. Or if you don't have a printer, you need to go to the outside shop and get it printed and get it composed if you don't have a laptop. So some method is definitely involved. So you plan about your document in the light of this constraint as well. Sometimes we need Microsoft because there is a word processor and you can correct a lot of mistakes by checking your written composed things. You can check plagiarism. You can plagiarism is when you use some words which have already been used by someone else, so they consider it copied. Even if you didn't copy it, they consider it copied if they match it with some other person's work who has already performed and generated a document, and in that document, so you need to check all these things. So your method of production will count and it will have to be taken care of and considered as a constraint. And then the next constraint is the method of distribution. Method of distribution, how will you distribute your document? And it is that manner in which the document is to be delivered to the reader, to your audience. Is it to be mailed, emailed, for instance, or via TCS? You've written a report and your supervisor is sitting outside in a foreign university. Is it to be sent via courier service or what? So it is also to be thought about. Sometimes you need an envelope, sometimes you just send an email, sometimes you just put it in a file, and the reader is the targeted audience in the next door office. So, I mean, it should be taken into account. The last constraint is the place of use. The last constraint is the place of use. The place of use means it's the physical surrounding in which the audience reads the document. Many, for example, manuals, user manuals is a document. Many manuals are used in confined, even dirty spaces that could require smaller paper size and buildings that can withstand heavy use. For example, uh, you you weapon has been developed for uh, the armed forces, and that weapon is a specialized weapon to be used in marshy areas, say for example, or on Siachen, let's say for example. Now, if you are the engineer or the person who is to generate the user manual as a document, now you will be considering the place of use, and in the light of the place of use, you will be not using a glazed paper, because in Siachen I have heard that there is a lot of sunlight and it's always a shimmer everywhere and things are glittering. So you must have seen the photographs of soldiers wearing, sunglasses. So a glazed paper won't work there. For example, if that weapon has to be used in marshy areas, it's highly likely that they'll be reading the user manual in places where there is always wetness, damp places. So the paper should be such that can endure and bear the dampness and doesn't get tear it doesn't get withered away. So place of use must also be considered. Or for example, if you are writing a user manual of a product, that product will be used by people over 50 or 60 years of age, and you have written the user manual in such a small font, and the size is such a small size that they cannot read it. They'll always be needing and glasses, and they'll be always needing to uh, read it in good light, illuminated places. So everything has to be taken care of while producing a document. So these are the six constraints which a writer must think. Even if you are producing a document today as students, think about these six constraints. Do consider them, give them a thought. This time, length, budget, method of production, method of distribution, and the place of use. Always bear them in mind. So, constraints are
सर
those.
प्रेजेंटेशन रुक गई है।
G?
प्रेजेंटेशन जो है ना स्लाइड्स वो हमें नजर नहीं आ रही, रुक गई है।
अच्छा, एक मिनट है। अभी देखिए नजर आ रही है।
नहीं।
आवाज बंद है।